It really is a privilege to be here at this wonderful setting this morning and to continue EY's support of Fintech and also Innovate Finance. Thank you for the very kind words of both Al and Lawrence, although I'm not going to be commissioning Al as a branding consultant for EY with his reference. So this morning, in keeping with some of the earlier speakers, I will look backwards to look forward, and Guildhall, being over 600 years old, is a fitting venue to do so. Some of the earliest references to Guildhall relate to its role in payments. The Anglo-Saxon word for guild, the Anglo-Saxon meaning of the word guild is payment, and Guildhall being a venue where citizens would come to make payments, an olden day payments infrastructure provider, if you will. And how neat is it that we have the history of payments being brought right up to the modern day with Ron Khalifa of WorldPay talking directly after me. Lawrence made reference to WorldPay as well, and it's nearly 6 months since they IPO'd, and it was a momentous day for them and a reflection of all their great work over many, many years. But also, I think it was a momentous day for the UK and a demonstration that UK fintech can succeed on the global stage. WorldPay are one of the UK's most long-standing fintech success stories, having started life over 20 years ago, and indeed began life where I started my career at NatWest, where one of their forerunners of the modern-day WorldPay was Streamline. And innovation is fluid. WorldPay's success demonstrates that it can spring up anywhere, not just in startups. But what makes a disruptive idea more likely to succeed, grow, and sustain itself, more likely to last the distance? This is something we at EY are extremely interested in. Why? Well, getting this right is going to be essential for our clients, both large and small, for the success of our own business, and for the ongoing success of UK financial services. And over the course of today, we will hear lots about innovation in the digital era. But for me, to truly understand the answers to the question that I've just raised, I think we need to look further back to really understand the potential we have for fintech in the UK. Centuries of world-leading innovation are at the heart of the UK's success in financial services. Centuries of world-leading innovation. And one of my favorite stories starts only a few minutes from here, and Mark Boliat also referenced it. But that at the Five Bells, a tavern located on Lombard Street. The Five Bells became famous not for its ales, although they may have been good. It became famous because it was the birthplace for the first known clearinghouse. Britain had invented the modern-day cheque in the mid-1600s, and within 100 years, lots of banks were issuing cheques. Serial numbers were created, and a payment mechanism that's lasted for over 250 years was born. However, it was inefficient, and it meant smartly dressed but slightly harassed-looking banking clerks ran around the city with bags of cheques between various banks, and that was a common sight. So a group of bank clerks rented a room in the Five Bells to exchange cheques, and a clearinghouse was born. Now, it took ingenuity, and some would argue maybe necessity on the grounds of health for these harassed banking clerks to come up with this idea, a place for banks to exchange cheques. And like most of the best ideas, it was born in a pub. Having said which, this example is about cheques and clearinghouses, but it could be about lots of others. The UK has not been short of outstanding innovation, and innovation that has lasted the distance. We had the first exchanges, the first central bank, coffee houses where merchants got access to trade, to finance their trade. We printed the first double-sided banknote, launched the first mass-market current account, overdraft, credit vouchers, opened the first ATM, telephone banking, and the first internet banking service. It is a long and impressive list and shows how the wave of fintech that we are currently going through and have been experiencing over the last few years is not the industry's first shot at innovation. And as an example, and relating back to the theme of payments, some would argue, me included, the UK has led the world of payments for many decades, and many of us, including me, were involved in the dot-com boom when e-wallets were all the rage. And we were all so excited by the technology, so excited by the endless possibilities that it presented, and convinced that the time was right then, and that the consumer would surely follow. But the funding fell out of the market before the consumers had caught up. And that taught me and a number of us some very valuable lessons, and some of which I will try and share with you now. But a lot has changed since that time. And a lot has changed such that it makes me even more convinced that fintech this time round is more likely to succeed. And we consider some of the elements that will encourage fintech to succeed in the report that's been referenced a couple of times already this morning, and the work that we did with HMT about the environment that will help foster fintech growth. Yes, you need the technology. Yes, you need the talent to work with it, and clearly the UK has that. You need a supportive policy environment, which the FCA and Treasury are providing. Initiatives like Project Innovate, mandatory referrals, open banking, the innovative finance ISA are unique and definitively world-leading. You need a world-class body to fly the flag for fintech, which we are extremely lucky to have through Innovate Finance. They're passionate about helping the UK become a world-leading fintech hub and to help their members be successful, and they should feel rightly proud of the success story that is UK fintech. And of course, you need investment, and we will hear lots more from investors later, but only over the last few weeks we've seen successful investment rounds for Lend Invest, World Remit, and of course the Mondo crowdfunding success story. But for the sector to really succeed and be sustained, to really crack the code, you need strong consumer adoption and advocacy. And over the last 15 years, digital has been turned to by a number of financial services firms as a way of managing a customer base and achieving scale. But sometimes it's felt like the customer has been left behind. If you think about some of the early digital security systems for banking, going back to NatWest in my time, there was Mondex, but there were many, many others, all of which, despite their best intent, slightly missed the mark. And as a consequence, consumers went back to using systems, processes, and channels that felt a little bit more intuitive and easy to use. Now, what's different and what's really exciting about this time is the tide of consumer adoption. It's turning, and across major markets globally, but in particular in the UK. We run an EY FinTech Adoption Index, and our most recent index, the results show dramatic increases in the adoption of FinTech. 1 in 7 digitally active consumers now regularly use more than one FinTech product. That's a huge increase in just over a year. And interestingly, adoption is set to double if in the next 12 months, if consumers' intents as they set out when we spoke to them are followed through. That is huge. And even more important is that usage increases in line with income. The highest rates of fintech use is amongst those aged between 18 and 34 and earning over $150,000 per annum, an attractive segment. Adoption is also increasing in what some may see as some of the more niche areas, telematics, investment advice, and so on, which suggests that the UK continues to be one of the most attractive markets for fintech globally. So what's changed? Some of it's already been touched on by Lawrence: technology, talent, capital, and I'm not going to delve further into those. I think for me, everyone now recognizes a key driver of adoption is ease of use. Making a service that both satisfies the customer's needs and is easy to use and is simple and intuitive can be surprisingly difficult. It's easy for me to stand up here and say it, but it can be surprisingly difficult, particularly for large and complex organizations. But I firmly believe that in today's market, only firms that can provide a great customer experience will survive and thrive. And this will require strong customer insights, smart use of data, intuitive digital platforms, and very simple and agile operations that underpin it. At the heart of all of this lies service design. Recently, some of you will be aware we acquired a business called Seren, and the very reason we did so was because of its capability in service design. Seren's approach to it is based on being truly user-centric. It's focused on improving or creating new services in line with the customer's underlying needs. So, for example, they will look at buying a house, not simply getting a mortgage. And we expect to see much more far-reaching customer-centric transformation over the next few years, particularly from the larger firms as they look to deal with years and years of underinvestment in their legacy platforms. We're excited about supporting this journey. So after the stresses and strains of the UK's financial services, of the global financial services crisis, I stand here as an optimist for UK financial services. Why? Well, quite simply, all of the innovation that I talked about before and the history and the centuries and centuries of innovation that we've had, we are re-engaging with that proud heritage through not only fintech but also digital more broadly. Our research for HMT, which Harriet Baldwin, the Minister, will talk about later on, calculated that fintech already employs 61,000 people here, generates over 6 billion in revenues to the UK economy. The sector is growing rapidly and is offering useful services to the end consumer, driving adoption and advocacy. Guildhall has survived the Great Fire of London, the Blitz, and still stands here today as relevant to helping push the City of London forward as it was 600 years ago. Now, I have no doubt, much like what's happened to Guildhall, there will be bumps in the road for fintech. But through being both innovative, useful, and focusing on what really matters, the end customer, I'm convinced the fintech sector is being built on solid foundations and will continue the UK's proud history for innovation. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the summit.